Early September, Guinea's special forces, trained by the United States Army, took control of the country, detaining the President Alpha Conde and suspending the constitution. Now, coup leader Lieutenant Colonel MamadyDoumbouya, who once served in the French Foreign Legion, speaks here on the reasons for the coup.
Nous avons décidé ainsi, après avoir pris le président qui est actuellement avec nous, de la République, nous avons décidé de dissoudre la Constitution en vigueur, de dissoudre les institutions. Nous avons décidé aussi de dissoudre le gouvernement, de la fermeture des frontières terrestres.
Hello and a warm welcome to Africa Today, a program which gives you an incisive analysis on events taking place in Africa. Now this week we are focusing on the recent military coup in mineral-rich Guinea, amid reports of US and French connection to the coup. In the second segment of our program, we shall discuss Uganda's move to ban export of raw materials to boost local industries. Do send us your comments on this show and our previous shows as you watch. Stay with us.
US-French connection in Guinea coup. On the 5th of September, Guinea's special forces took control of the country, detaining the president Alpha Conde and suspending the constitution. Coup leader Lieutenant Colonel MamadyDoumbouya announced the next day that a new administration of national union would be formed. Guinea's new military rulers have held consultations with political, business and religious leaders. The purpose, they say, is the formation of a transitional government following the coup. Mekale Kamara of the Front for National Alliance participated at one of the dialogue sessions, which she said focused on reconciliation.
The political parties promise their support because when Guinea is concerned, everyone has to toe the line.
The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, has meanwhile imposed sanctions against the military government in Guinea. On a visit to Conakry following the coup, Ivorian President Alassane Ouattara, who was accompanied by Ghanaian President, said they had an excellent meeting with the new military leader.
Nous avons eu un excellent séjour à Conakry. Je voudrais remercier mon jeune frère, le président Doumbouya, et dire le président du CNRD, et dire que nous avons eu un excellent entretien. Le président Nana Akufo-Addo, que j'ai accompagné, vient de vous dire l'essentiel. Donc nous avons aussi rencontré mon frère Alpha Condé, qui va bien, et nous garderons le contact. Merci au peuple de Guinée.
Now, for an incisive analysis on the Guinea coup, we have contacted Mr. Freeman, a coordinating committee member of the Black Alliance for Peace. Thanks a lot for joining us. Now, Mr. Freeman, what are the main factors that led to the coup in Guinea?
One is something that's common throughout Africa, is the fact that the people were dissatisfied, and the dissatisfaction of the people was something that the military forces that took over the country used to take over. In terms of, I guess maybe they even shared their satisfaction. If not, they at least used it as an excuse. So there's widespread dissatisfaction with the fact that the people don't control the economy. There's poverty, the infrastructure is poor. There's also the current president Alpha Conde did something very unpopular from the people, was trying to change the constitution so he could run for a third term in 2020. So people didn't like that. And then in response to it, there was a lot of demonstrations that were attacked by the state, just brutally attacked, and a lot of people were killed.
Thanks for that, Mr. Anafta Freeman.
The Guinea coup leader, Lieutenant Colonel MamadyDoumbouya, was trained by the United States Armed Forces. He also served the French Foreign Legion in Afghanistan and Ivory Coast and completed the commando training course in Israel. According to witnesses, US Marines in Guinea's capital, Conakry, were seen celebrating the fall of President Conde, and reports started spreading out their possible involvement in the coup.
The coup leader in Guinea served in the French Foreign Legion and was trained in the US and Israel. Is there more to this coup than meets the eye?
Well, I think the broader context in Africa is the more that meets the eye. A lot of people don't know how extensive the French military is in the continent of Africa, and also AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command militarism. And so these trainings really are almost, they're like the only thing really that the Western countries have to offer, not just the trainings, the militarism that's claimed to be fighting terrorist extremism, extreme terrorism, is not doing so really, and it's actually even exacerbating it. There's that. There's also the fact that AFRICOM and even the French are really concerned about China and China's influence in the continent of Africa. And actually most of these coups in West Africa have taken place in countries where China has heavy influence, investments. And Israel and the US and French share this animosity, this new Cold War with China.
Now, Guinea has the largest untapped iron ore reserves in the world, and it's also the world's second largest bauxite producer. Prices for aluminium ore and bauxite from this country hit their highest in almost 18 months in top metals consumer China early September, as buyers worried about supply after a coup in this West African country.
Around 50% of China's bauxite supply comes from Guinea, making it China's #1 source of the mineral. Mining executives in the country said they were reassured after meeting Lieutenant Colonel Doumbouya. One of the mining executives speaks here after the meeting.
We discussed the difficulties we face on the mining sites, the challenges and opportunities in the mining sector that the Guinean people expect following discussions with the CNRD. The CNRD officials have reassured us a lot, and we are proud of this. It must be said that this coup d'etat is the first in Guinea, after which we have continued our activities. We are living reassured by the new Guinean authorities.
The latest coup in Guinea and the reaction of the economic community of Western African states to suspend the country's membership have yet again demonstrated the ineffectiveness of the regional body in enforcing the rule of law in the region. It also raises questions about the commitment of its member states to comply with its protocols. Ghana's president and ECOWAS chair Nana Akufo-Addo spoke during the Regional Emergency Summit on the political situation in Guinea and expressed confidence that the body will be able to solve the crisis.
We are required to take informed decisions on these matters that will have long-term consequences for the stability and the defense of the democratic values of our region.
Now, ECOWAS and the African Union have suspended Guinea's membership after the coup, but experience has shown that such action is not stopping coups in Africa. What needs to be done to rectify the situation?
ECOWAS didn't do anything when Alpha Conde and others, Ouattara in Ivory Coast, wanted to change their constitutions. So there's a lot of, if we were talking about democracy and good governance, if it's a people-centered, human rights defined thing, ECOWAS would fall very short in being able to secure these things. So I'm not sure it really can. There are leaders from various countries, all of which mostly are wedded to a global economy that's dominated by the Western powers, and to the extent that they look to anything else, it's still a very capitalist, controlled country where people are experiencing widespread poverty and lack of control, austerity, all of these things. The International Monetary Fund and the IMF still control. So ECOWAS is fine with all of these things. And so being such, it'll still have to, it's really actually still facilitating a legacy of colonialism and neocolonialism.
Now, there is concern that the military takeovers in Mali, Chad and Guinea might embolden military officers in regional countries where governments have staved off major opposition movements, coup attempts and army mutinies in recent years. Now, our last question to you, Mr. Freeman. Do you think militaries in fragile regional countries might be tempted to overthrow civilian governments following successful coups in Mali and Guinea?
This could happen. I mean, I think the militarization of the continent, which is very intense, it's like the people have to really understand that even AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command, which is more widespread than any other Western military and any military in the world in Africa, is in 53 of the 54 countries in Africa, with the exception of Eritrea. There is some sort of command, some kind of thing there, and that even with and France also shoring up its military relationship. So this has the effect of creating it can have the effect of creating an emboldened military class that really could see no benefit in taking the orders of very unpopular, long-standing, civilian, led government dictators, so to speak, by a lot of people. And so it could lead to that. We're still too soon to say also what's behind some of these things. We don't really even know if some of these coups could be even orchestrated by CIA or MI6 intelligence operations. We don't know. And it's not unlikely. It's not, something unlikely.
Well, there you have it. There is likelihood that the military takeovers in Africa are orchestrated by Western spy agencies such as the American Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. What do you think about that? Let us know through our social media handle. We now take a short break, and when we come back, we shall talk about Uganda's move to ban export of raw materials. Stay with us.
Uganda bans export of raw materials.
The Ugandan government has banned exportation of raw materials to encourage adding of value on all raw materials before exporting them. Now, the country's Minister for Trade, Harriet Ntembazi, says 69% of raw materials in the country are exported, hence causing revenue loss, adding that the ban will encourage adding of value on all raw materials before exporting them.
Uganda mostly exports agricultural products, which account to nearly 80% of the total exports. The country's most important exports include coffee, tea, cotton, tobacco, copper, oil and fish.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has also on several occasions reiterated on the importance of value addition to the country's agricultural commodities and minerals.
We were exporting copper, 94 degrees pure, then importing more refined copper, 99.9%, to make the cables and the transformers and so on. This time with the Kirembe, I have insisted, anybody who comes there must purify to 99.9 degrees, what they call cathode.
Well, to get an insight into Uganda's move to ban export of raw materials, we have contacted Mr. Africa Kiiza, a development anthropologist and a trade policy analyst at Southern Eastern Africa Trade Information and Negotiations Institute in Uganda. Now, our first question to you, Mr. Kiiza, is the ban of export of raw materials the right decision at this time in Uganda?
Yes, the proposed ban on export of raw materials is very important. It comes at a time when government of Uganda and Africa are in high gear towards the industrialization drive. For a long time, Africa has been locked in primary commodity dependence, especially exports of raw materials to the global north to feed the industries of the global north. And this has not supported the industrialization. Actually, this has locked Africa in a perpetual position where she is just inserted into the global economy as a lower value chain actor, as a supplier of raw materials. So yes, at a time when Uganda and Africa are trying to create jobs, trying to increase on their competitiveness in the global economy, then the drive for industrialization is critical, and this can only be achieved through imposing bans on exports of raw materials.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kiiza.
The Minister of Trade, Harriet Ntembazi, says the Trade Ministry has negotiated a $29 million loan from development partners and sourced another $29 million given to the Uganda Development Bank. This cash is expected to boost the production capacity of local industries this financial year. Does Uganda have the necessary policies in place to boost industries and produce products that can compete globally?
In terms of policy space, we do not have the policy space, and I'm actually surprised that the minister is saying this because we have given away every policy space in trade agreements with economies like the EU, that these trade agreements actually make it hard, if not impossible, for countries like Uganda to be able to impose taxes and tariffs on exports of raw materials, because under, for example, the Economic Partnership Agreement, which is a free trade agreement that we've negotiated with the EU, it ensures that African countries should not impose any taxes on raw materials.
There is concern that the raw material export ban in Uganda might not benefit all farmers. For instance, cotton farmers in some parts of the country are bothered by the uncertainty about weather and prices for their produce. Yet, despite these adversities, a determined cotton farmer in Uganda says he will keep trying.
I have grown up planting cotton. It provides for me. I just can't leave it. I will give it one more season. If it fails, I will only reduce on what I plant.
How will value addition of Ugandan agricultural commodities improve the lives of peasant farmers?
To impose taxes on raw material exports is very critical because it helps farmers in terms of boosting their climbing on the global value chains and especially boosting their domestic value chains. Over the time, we have seen a robbing of farmers in terms of locking them down the level of supply and producers of raw materials, which have enriched the industries of the global north to the extent that our industries have ended up collapsing. It is not uncommon to see the leather industry, the textile industry, and for example even the fish industry collapsing in Uganda when our exports of raw materials in terms of cotton, in terms of fish, raw fish, have been increasing over time. So in terms of fair prices, in terms of getting value out of their products, in terms of reducing the financial hemorrhage, but also most importantly and critically, in terms of achieving a structural and inclusive industrialization agenda, this move is very important in terms of farmers being supported to be able to increase on their competitiveness, their productivity, and also in terms of their access to competitive markets at a higher end of the value chain.
Now, as Africa confronts the challenges of a global economy, it is being forced to make tough choices in negotiating new trade agreements with its major trading partners, particularly the European Union and the US. Now, Mr. Kiza, you earlier talked about how Uganda's trade agreements with the West are an impediment to industrialization in this country. Now, is the situation similar in other African countries?
These trade agreements have contributed a lot in locking us out of competitive value chains. When you look at, for example, reciprocal free trade agreements we have negotiated with the European Union, including AGOA, which is just a preferential market access, they are insisting on ensuring that Africa does not, for example, impose tariffs on exports of raw materials. So this continues to grant Europe, for example, continued and unhindered access of raw materials from Africa. When you look at the case of coffee under AGOA, Africa is only allowed to export green coffee beans to the United States, explicitly stated in the AGOA text. So that locks Africa out of the chances of adding value onto coffee. So in able to have a transformative industrialization agenda, we need to rethink some of these policies.
Very unfortunate indeed there that trade agreements with Western countries are a hindrance to the successful industrialization of African countries. Now, before we wind up today, we also have an exclusive interview with Joel Epe-Mandengu, a Cameroonian comic book author and stand-up comedian. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, first tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Sure. I am Joel Epe-Mandengu. My artist name is Alliance. I am a Cameroonian artist doing comics, stand-up, comedy show, and I'm also a director of festival. I've created a festival about comics, and finally, I'm a curator on comics exhibitions.
Okay, now, why did you choose the art of comics to convey your thoughts and emotions?
Let's say that since I was little, I started watching cartoons when I was like 6 months. And that was pretty young. And I really, really loved and enjoyed watching things that were drawn and animated. And later on, I wanted to do it myself or by myself. So I did my first comic books at the age of 7. I did the cover and everything when I was 9 years old. And later on, I did studies on comics. I still had, at the core, the desire to do animated series. But when I did the studies on comics, I fell in love with the way you can tell stories and convey emotions through images, not animated images, but drawn images on papers. And this relationship that you can have with the people reading, the readers, it's something precious that I don't leave the same with people watching animated series.
Now, what kind of stories do you narrate in your works usually?
Let's say that I have a very wide, I have diverse themes that I use in my comic books. With the Diary of a Banduta, which is the most popular comics that I do, I talk about the life of an African lady who lives out of her country, out of her continent, in Belgium, where she speaks French, but not French like Belgian people, and even Belgian people don't speak French like people from France. So I really try to talk about how you encounter other people who don't share the same culture and who in appearance have the same language as you, but in the details are very different from you.
Now, finally, tell us about the Afropolitan comics and the idea behind it.
Sure. Afropolitan Comics is an exhibition that anyone can find on the internet. It's online, it's free. It's a free access exhibition that I did with curators from South Africa, Tara Weber and Ray Witcher, with also a French curator, Jean-Philippe Martin, from the City of Comics of Angoulême. And we really wanted to do a 16 authors from Africa exhibition, showing what the continent had, to show to the world. Because when we think of Africa, many still have nowadays very funny ideas about the continent, or they think of the continent as a whole and they don't really see the countries and the diversities of the people living in the countries. So with Afropolitan Comics, that's the reason why it's called Afropolitan. We are showing what the authors on the continent can present to the world, which are contemporary piece of art.
That was Joel, a Cameroonian comics author and stand-up comedian. Well, and that wraps it up for this week's edition of Africa Today. Thanks a lot for watching, and we hope you enjoyed the show. It will be great hearing from you, so send us your comments through our social media handle. Goodbye for now.